All right, let's get started. And I'm excited that you guys are here and we're ready to talk about React and Kintone and also Shepherd.JS. We're going to be doing a little bit of onboarding today, which is always a underrated but very cool and useful thing to have in your portfolio, especially if you're like getting out of coding school and looking to job hunt. I guess just rated, like part of coding is like how do users actually come and interact with your websites, and showing a cool like onboarding project off to HR people whenever you're doing like a coding job interview, they get it and it looks cool and they always appreciate that. So it's going to be very useful today, especially if you're like job hunting. And if you're not, then we're going to be going through React stuff. We're going to be like experimenting with a new library, and hopefully even if you're an experienced coder, then you can still be inspired. If you clone the repo, that's great. I just showed you a little bit about what we're going to be making today. We're going to be doing a React project, and we're going to be using a little bit of onboarding. So we're going to be doing some HTML. We're going to be doing some JavaScript today. And we're going to make a cool little sort of like puzzle, basically, that you have to use onboarding to guide your users through so they can open the treasure chest. The puzzle itself, not a big deal. It could be a puzzle. It could be registration form for your e-commerce website. It doesn't actually matter what it is, but what is cool is that you're going to be guiding users from it. And also we're going to be using an online web database to upload some of those onboarding statistics using Kintone, which is going to be easy enough to do. And this will run locally on your computer, and it'll be fun. Yep. So let's get started here. I'm going to Git Clone. And we're going to walk through this together just in case you haven't done that already. So first things, we're here on the GitHub, and if you haven't already, just go on over here to code. Yep, ready to clone. Going over to my terminal, my React folder, and we're cloning. So we're going to get all of this project. And today's project actually, so we have basically a backend, which is going to handle posting to our web database. And then we're going to have a front end, which actually displays our puzzle and our onboarding tour as well. So it's split into two parts. Today we will be only coding the front end, and we will not actually be touching the back end. And the reason is because we did a whole video and tutorial, a couple of videos actually, about doing a backend. And you can see it right here. So if you're like, wait, how the heck did they set this up? We got a whole video. And it's a pretty simple Express backend that just opens up some ports and posts to Kintone for us. So if you're interested in that, definitely check that out. So change directories into your repo that we just cloned, and open up your favorite code editor. Here we go. And you can see also, just like I was talking about, we have our backend folder right here. We have our front end folder, and this is going to have our React app, so to speak, and it's going to have our puzzle grid, and it's going to have our content, it's going to have our tour, all kinds of stuff in there. We also have this docs folder. I put a lot of time into making it, so it'd be cool if you check it out. If you really get lost, we have the entire workshop here, all written down in text form, like step by step, like what to do. It's all in Markdown. And yeah, we also have the completed code if you ever get super lost. We're going to get a Kintone subdomain later, but I kind of want to talk a little bit more about the structure of today. And we're only going to be coding 3 different files. And one we're going to do is our .m file. .m stores your secret information in your coding projects, right? It's a hidden file that you don't want to share with people. It has like usernames, login passwords, API tokens. When we make a Kintone database, we're going to need to get an API token and post it in here. We're going to be editing App.js. And App.js here is going to be our entry point into our React app. And it's going to have all of our variables. So when you are doing our puzzle, and you see how it has like option 2, or click here 7 times, the variable, like keeping track of how many times you clicked or which fruit you picked and stuff like that's going to be stored in there. And then Content.js is going to have that grid that you see right here in our finished product, and it's going to have like our HTML elements, so the actual selector, like image and things. So we'll be coding those, and what we're going to do today, go into our project and just make sure our environment's all ready to go. So we're going to install some dependencies, just a quick npm install. We're going to make our web database and get that out of the way real fast. And then after I talk a little bit about Kintone, we're going to do some coding. If you're here to learn about React, nice choice. And we'll be doing some HTML. We're going to be doing some JavaScript in React, aka JSX. All right, guys. So here, once again in our terminal, let's install our dependencies and just make sure that this is all set up. So first things first, you cloned into the Shepherd React tutorial. You've changed into that directory CD, right? Next, you're going to go into your back end right here. So we have our back end. You can see that we have this server.js, we have a package.json, a package lock.json, some node modules. That's always a good hint that you need to. npm install. So that's one of the first things that we're going to do is just make sure all of our backend server. And we're going to make sure that's installed and ready to go. And then enter an npm start. It'll start up our backend server, and we have a little message for you that your backend server is listening at 50/50, and you can access it. And go ahead and open up another tab or another terminal window, and we're just going to leave this backend running this whole time because we don't really have to change anything with it. Okay. And in our second one, we're going to go back to our root directory right here, and we're back here in our main Shepherd React tutorial directory, and go ahead and change into the front end folder. We're going into the front end folder now, and we got some more package.json stuff, so we are going to npm install, 7 high security vulnerabilities. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. And then you can go ahead and hit npm start just to see if everything loads up, just to make sure that everything's booting up real quick. And you should have just this blank grid with purple lines and then a button at the top that says start the tour. So if you manage to npm start both of your backend and front end and you're following along with me, please give me a quick thumbs up. So we're going to be doing like some React basics and Shepherd.JS, which is just like an onboarding library that's open source, and we'll be doing a lot of JavaScript coding. And then if you don't know much about React, we're going to be doing some kind of like basic stuffs. And even if you're like, oh, I don't get it 100%, it's totally cool because the first step to getting used to something or getting good at something is sucking at it. And so if it's okay if you don't understand everything that's going on, I'll try and explain it really simply. So I think it'll be fun. Real quick, React helps you make apps, not websites, but like apps as websites. And when we're doing and writing in React, we're writing in this thing called like React JavaScript, aka JSX. JavaScript is JS, React's JavaScript is JSX. And what JSX does is it uses JavaScript to output HTML. So like when you would write a website back in like the early 90s, you have like your H1 header, welcome to my website. And then you have image tag, and you have to hard code all that stuff in. And nowadays with these modern frameworks like React, you can write JavaScript, which is code. And remember, code does cool stuff, right? Like you can have variables, or you can have if statements, and you can use those coding abilities basically to output HTML. So instead of saying, welcome to my website in text, you can have JavaScript that says, if this is a new user, say, welcome to my website. If this is a user who has been here before, say, welcome back. React allows you to separate your code into like concerns and different files to help you keep track of everything, so you don't have to have one gigantic document. And you can import those files into each other using JavaScript ESX imports, so it helps keep your code base organized. And yeah, you can keep track of variables, and also you can keep track of variables state, which is going to be a big part of what we do today. Using React hooks is what they're called. React hooks got introduced in 20 19 or like 2018, at first React was like using classes, right? If you've done object-oriented programming, they have these classes. And then, so you have a class like, what is a user? And then you have to make a new user. And then that user has an ability to log in and blah, blah, blah. React changed in a major way after a couple years of its development into a function-based framework. And if you don't know what that means, it's totally fine. Basically, if you're looking up tutorials and like, how do I do this in React? And like classes, just know that it's old right off the bat. Just know that if you see classes, and that's probably the old way of doing stuff in React, which still works because they don't want to like make it outdated. But everyone is using hooks and everyone is using these functions in React now. We're going to be doing all functions, all hooks. And that's just a really quick way or easy way to know if the content that you're looking up is new or old. So that's React. And what is Shepherd? Shepherd is just an onboarding library. There's a couple of onboarding libraries. There's Intro.js, there's Shepherd.js, which we'll be doing today. There's React Joyride, which is like a React-specific one. We picked Shepherd because it's open source. 2, they don't expect you to pay for stuff if you like make money off of it. It's totally free open source. And also, it's not necessarily React-specific. When you go to their website, if you ever want to check it out, Shepherd.js.dev, this is onboarding libraries. See this right here? It highlights something, it points an arrow to stuff, it scrolls around for you. Using Shepherd is easy. Just do this, blah, blah, blah. Just do that. Attach to elements and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to skip this. But this is what Shepherd.js is, and we're using the Shepherd React package. But you could totally do this like pure vanilla, just like import Shepherd.js, just like they tell you to right here. That's totally doable as well. The React package just makes it a little bit easier to bundle and have you guys install it without having to explicitly import it in our code, which kind of mucks up our code base a little bit. So that's what Shepherd is. And then lastly, the third piece of our project here today, when we're doing onboarding, this is what's going to separate you if you're showing off your code to other people to just like a random, oh yeah, I did an onboarding library. Because when you're working with code professionally, everyone's going to be like, okay, yeah, you onboarded people. What are you going to do with that information? Are you keeping track of that information? And we're going to create a database today that will not like we're not only just going to onboard people, we're going to keep track of, one, did our user complete our puzzle? Because we have this task for people and that's what we're onboarding them through, we're touring them through. Did they complete our puzzle? And then 2, how much of our onboarding did they like go through or scroll through before they either finished it or gave up? And so it's only a 3-step puzzle, so we're going to have 3 steps, 100 divided by 3, so 33%. 66% or 100% completion. Basically, we're going to keep track of those 2 things, and that's, I think, really cool. And if you were to talk about something at a job interview, they'd be like, oh, wow, this person's really smart and was really business focused. So we're going to use Kintone in order to store that information because A, it's super easy. Kintone is a no-code, low-code cloud database platform where you can basically make these apps, create databases, and then collaborate it on with other people. And whenever I talk about Kintone, today I think most of you guys are like individual developers and stuff. Am I right? Like you're not like working with a big team and stuff like that. That's totally cool. And that's a lot of how I use Kintone as well. You can use Kintone together as a big team, and I'll talk just a little bit about that, but also in your individual projects in order to spin up web apps and just do it fast and get it out there. I use Kintone all the time, and it's great for individual devs as well. And what's special about it, though, is that like you can have data, and then you can have conversations about that data, which is really cool, in my opinion. So if you were working on a team, and your boss is like, hey, Sean, I need you to edit the 2022 summer expense reports ASAP, buddy. And I'll be like, oh no, where is that? Where are those expense reports? Which file did I save them in? Are they in someone's Google Drive or Dropbox? That sucks because you can't find out where everything is. Or on the other hand, it turns out that there was a problem with the 2020 expense report or whatever, and I need to ask our sales team to make sure that the numbers are correct. So where do I message them about this file or this data? Is it Slack or Skype or whatever, or email? It's just a lot of, there's basically a huge gap. And that's what Kintone does, as you can see over here. And we'll make one of these later. It'll take 5 seconds. But you have all this data that we're talking about, and then you have like comments, and you can mention people and pass these like records around to each other and talk about it, which is pretty cool, in my opinion. So if you're working together on a team, it's super duper cool. And then if you're like an individual developer, though, you can use Kintone basically to quickly spin up and power up your web apps with it. An online database is fantastic because you don't have to make your own SQL database locally. It automatically backs up and all your stuff's saved in the cloud as long as you have internet access, your web app's working. And it creates your API routes for you, your API token functionality and stuff like that, so you don't have to go into your routes and create a new Git endpoint, which is a big pain in the butt. And so even though like I've been coding for, gosh, like 5 years now, and I could make a database, I don't want to. It's just like, it's a lot of work. And I highly recommend like when you're trying to like just focus on front end or get something out the door, a minimum viable product, MVP, you could just use an online database that is highly customizable, which you can make anything really, because we use JavaScript in Kintone to power up the apps. And you can definitely get your product out there and get it out there fast. And if you are like business minded and you're like a developer looking to get out there and make some money, actually Kintone is awesome. You can create Kintone customizations, which we're using Kintone and customizing it today. You can make Kintone customizations and sell them. There are whole companies here in Japan and also abroad. Their whole company is just based on customizing Kintone. And they sell these extensions in our marketplace, which is awesome. And also there's jobs that are just working on Kintone as well. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end, but we have a new like jobs category in our forums where people are just hiring Kintone engineers, which is pretty cool. Let's get started and make our database. What is a Kintone subdomain? Basically, it's this right here, sean.kintone.com. Yours is not going to be sean.kintone.com. It's going to be whatever you create. But you're going to make your own Kintone subdomain, and the part that you're going to pick is that Sean part, aka if you're making your Kintone subdomain, you want it to be like, I love Justin Bieber.kintone.com, and when you finally log in, you're going to have this Kintone portal where you can make apps and databases. So click on that link, and you're going to fill out this form right here. Just your first name, last name. Your email, though, is important. It is your login name at first. So put in an email, and also it's going to send you like a verification email just to prevent spam. And then you can fill out a little bit of information. Are you interested in coding, or like how did you hear about us? And that just helps us. And then the last part right here, like I said before, create your Kintone developer license subdomain. So I put in Sean right here in this bottom part of the form, and my Kintone subdomain was sean.kintone.com. So put in whatever you want here. So once you have your Kintone subdomain, it's going to send you an email. Check your spam email if it went to your spam folder on accident. And you're going to do your initial password, and then you're going to log into Kintone. And when you get to this kind of like portal page, then we're going to make our database together in less than 5 minutes. And that'll be a database. That'll be our API routes and also an API token. And we're going to do all that together in less than 5 minutes, and then we're going to get into coding. It's going to be fun. So we're going to go in here. My Kintone subdomain, a little bit customized, but yours should look pretty much the same. And you're going to click over here in apps. I already made one app, but you're going to click over here on this big plus. I want to make a new app, aka I want to make a new database. Okay. You can create it from an Excel, right? Because what is Excel? Excel is just a column with rows. It's just a database, right? Or CSVs. You can also do templates or copy apps. We're going to create an app from scratch because our database is super simple this time. And I'm going to name it Customer Onboarding 2 because I already made one earlier. You can name it whatever you want. What we're going to be keeping track of today in our app, this will become a little bit more clear as we actually get into our code. I'm doing the database first, and then I'm doing the code. When I made this workshop, I did the code first, and then I made a database to go with it, but it makes a little bit more sense, and it'll be faster just to make our database first. But what we're keeping track of is two things, right? We're keeping track of, one, did people complete our little puzzle? And then two, how much percent of our onboarding did they do? Was our onboarding necessary? Was it not? Was it too boring and they stopped at 33% of the way through stuff? And so the way that we're going to keep track of did they finish or not is a radio button right here. And the way that we're going to keep track of our percent is going to be a number field. So we are making a database right now live, and you're going to do one radio button and one number. Go into the settings, so just drag them up there, but go into the settings of your radio button right there. And we're just going to name this, let's say, onboarding completed. Doesn't really matter what the name is. This is for you to keep track of things. Just completed is also fine. It's all I want to know. And then in our options, we're going to have no and yes. Either they finished our puzzle or they did not. And our default value is no. Sure, that's useful. And the last part that is the most basically like important and hard to mess up is something down here called a field code. That is how Kintone is going to set up our API so we can post into this database, basically. You want to make sure that you set this to lowercase completed, basically. Case does matter here, right? Up here, like I could have done this, whatever, it's just a name for a field. But down here, this is how our API is actually going to get set up for us. So do a lowercase completed. If you really want to do something else, that's totally fine, but you would have to go into the code and change it. If you did, instead of completed, you did finished, then you'd have to go into the code and change all the instances of completed to finished, basically. Click Save. All right, we're halfway done. Next, go into your number field. Do the same thing with our settings. Percent onboarded. Sure. We're doing a percent, and you can't have more than 100% onboarding, so we're going to just set up a maximum of 100%. Sure, why not? And let's see. It's a percent, so let's add a percent sign at the end. Sure, that's just for our visuals. It doesn't actually matter. And once again, for the field code, lowercase p percent. Lowercase p percent. So change the name. Maybe if you want to make it prettier and do like a maximum of 100 and add a percent sign, totally cool. Lowercase p percent, save your form, and activate your app. And congratulations, you just made a web cloud database which has a database entry number, aka our record number. It has is our onboarding completed, yes or no, and it has your percent onboarded. It is automatically type safe, so this is a number field over here, right? So you can't go posting text in there. That's great. Your database is secure data-wise. And also, we are going to set up our API, or we set up our API routes. The last thing that we have to do now, guys, is we are going to make an API token, okay? So once you make your database and everything's finished, click on this little settings wheel up here. We're back on the same thing, so you didn't actually have to navigate away, but it's always good to activate your app. Go to App Settings up here in the top. API token. And we're going to generate an API token here. Yes, you can see my API token. I will be changing it later, don't worry. And give yourself the ability to view records, add records, yeah, sure, edit records. So you can handle permissions with a click of a button. This is such a pain in the butt to do with a local database. So it's really nice. I love using Kintone to get things like sped up and going quickly. If I didn't work here, I would still be using Kintone, guarantee it. So go ahead and save that, and then just copy and paste your API token. And we're going to be pasting this into our .m file. Remember, we have our environment file that's going to have all of our secrets in it. So we're going to be copy and pasting this later. So you can either keep this open or just save it, and then also make sure you update your app one last time. I sometimes forget to update my app. Definitely update the app. And once it's all done, we are done finagling with Kintone. Isn't that awesome? We just made a whole database with API routes and type safety and an API token authentication and all this cool stuff in less than 5 minutes. Very cool. So we're going to connect our API using this .m file right here. So let's go into VS Code right here and just set up our .m file. And it's going to be in the root of our directory. You're going to see this .m.example file. If you're, like used to programming, you're like, oh yeah, here's my .m.example. If you're new to production coding stuff, you don't want to share or upload to GitHub your real .m file. There's like super secret information. If you had an expensive like Google API token, right? Someone could copy your API token and rack up a bunch of charges on your Google Maps API account. So what a lot of projects will do, and what you should do in your projects, especially ones that you want to show off or like use to get a coding job, is have a .m.example file if you need to. And this kind of shows people like you should have these kinds of variables. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but they should look like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste our .m.example. Don't delete it. And then we're going to rename it to just .env.env. There you go. And VS Code like expects a .m. They gave us a cool little icon for our .m file right there. So it definitely knows what's going on. Please. So we need 3 things though in order to connect to our Kintone app. We just did our API token. I accidentally didn't copy paste it all the way. So one more time, if you need your API token, just go over here, the API tokens, copy, and paste. Make sure that there's no random space at the end of that. That was a little weird. So there's our API token, but we also need to tell our API, we have our subdomain up here and our app ID. And so what is your subdomain and your app ID? Just the quick way to tell you is basically check your URL. So you can see up here, my Kintone subdomain is sean.kintone.com. So in my subdomain, I will be putting Sean right there. And then how do I get my app ID? Your app ID is basically which database am I trying to post to? Because Kintone allows you to make apps in database, quote unquote, right here. Let's see on the right side right here. I have 5 different databases or 5 different apps in here, right? We want to tell our app to post to customer onboarding to. We need to tell us what app that is. Right up here in your URL, mine is /k/39 because I've made 39 different projects. Yours is probably going to be like 1 or 2 if you're not making a bunch of apps stuff. So check your URL after the /k, and that's going to be your app ID. So mine was 39, so app ID 39. There you go. And we're done. We're done right there. That's all you got to do. Another cool note just about API tokens. Yeah, I'm sharing my API token, but when we made our database, I did it with a radio button that only accepts yes or no and a number field that has a max of 100. So even if some stranger was to like view this and I forgot to remove my API token, all they could do to post to my database, because we have that type safety built in, is post yes or no or post a number from less than 100. Oh no. So we have our app ID. And we just did our API token. We're going to start out by going over the code a little bit and just talking a little bit about how we're posting. Then we're going to do some HTML and basically make a fun puzzle in our grid. And then we're going to make a tour to guide through our puzzle using Shepherd.JS. Does that sound cool? So let's dive into our code right there. And remember when we started up our app and we have our React app, right? So we have like our 2 goals we already see. Right now we just have a blank grid, right? We're going to make a cool little puzzle for people to navigate through. So first we need some content for our grid. And then second, we're going to make a tour so that when we click the Start Tour button, you can guide people through the puzzle basically and have them open up a cool treasure chest, all right? So the first thing that we're going to do, our grid content is all here in App.js and Content.js. We also have an images folder where I just have a picture of a treasure chest and an open treasure chest. There's some JavaScript that you can import. We also have our API request in requests if you want to go check that out. Remember earlier when we started up our backend, PM start in the backend folder, we said that your record endpoint, you could post to 50/50 right there. So that's what we're doing up here. This is our API post request. And we're posting, remember, also in our Kintone app, we had our field codes, right? Lowercase c completed, lowercase p %. This is what you would have to change, right? This and this right here. And basically, we're just, when you call this function, this post record function, which we've defined here, and you can import anywhere in your code, it's basically going to post this content to Kintone, await the response, and then just spit it out in the console, basically. And then we're exporting this function so you can check it out or import it anywhere else in your code. That's a good kind of skill to have in code bases, especially if they're like working with other people's code or like you're on a team. So it says like async function post record, and we're exporting it as post record, capital P, capital R. If you just go into search and type in post record, you can see it up in here, and you can find out where that is. And you can see also like post record, like that. It gets imported from our app.js folder right here. Import post record. That's pretty cool. And the way that our React project is set up, there's a lot of boilerplate that just comes when you do create React app. It first makes this index.js. And how React works is like it hooks into a HTML element called the root, and it uses React DOM.createRoot to do that. This all got created for me. I didn't code any of this myself. It's just boilerplate. But in that root, we're going to render our /app. And our /app is imported from in the same folder /app, app.js. And then we have our function called app. So this is where like we're all hooked into our React app basically, and this is where we can start coding and display stuff. And we have a couple of to-dos here that we're going to go through. And then down at the bottom for React, whenever you have like a React function, right? So we have this function. We have a bunch of JavaScript up here, right? That has like variables and our hooks, and we'll go into a little bit of that later. And we have a lot of to-dos and comments and random functions in here. Then it's going to return something. And so what these function components do in X and React, basically, you have all this JavaScript up here, and then that helps you define and return HTML down here in the return statement. And so when this app.js gets called over here, right, that it's a return function. A function has something that returns something, so it's like what gets spit out of the function. So what is getting spit out of this function right here, this /app that we're doing? This HTML and JSX. What is this JSX and stuff like that? We have it filled out already, but basically it's a big div with a tour, a grid that we have defined somewhere else, and that's it, and a button at the top that says start a tour. Okay, wait, so we have the tour, I get that, so that's the Shepherd tour. What is grid content or something? So when you see like this milk statement here, like the capitals, right? Our grid content, what the heck is that? Oh, I see import grid content from ./content.js. Okay, here's content.js. Oh, look, more functions and stuff like that. So we're like importing these different layered and separated out components. That's part of the magic of React, where I can have, okay, here's my grid, here's my app. Maybe later on, if we refactor a little bit, oh, here is my images and stuff. Here is my button clicker and stuff like that. So here we have this grid content, and we have a lot of things at the top called props. What are props? Props is a React way, or basically almost any modern JavaScript framework way, of passing around data. And once we code out our puzzle a little bit more, I had to write this in because we can't be coding everything today. But you'll see what these are later on when we talk about hooks, and we have our like puzzle elements like all together. But we have all these props, which is all this data like account and fruits and random stuff. And then we're returning like this grid. So here's what's being returned, right, once again from our function. And we have this big grid, and this is the CSS grid that you see right here. We just have a 5x5 grid down in CSS Grid. If you really want to check out the CSS for it, it's all right here if you want to see that. It's just boring CSS. And we have all these grid items. And then we have a couple places here where I've marked like where we want to put some fun stuff into our grid, just as like puzzles. So we're going to get started doing that. And so in our finished product, basically, we have a couple of things. So we're going to start with our first to-do. I'm just going to get rid of this because we're going to code it right now. In our div class name of fruits, we're going to put a fruits selector. So what we're going to do basically is have, if you look all the way back over here to our finished product, you have a option selector. You're supposed to click here, and then we have choose a fruit. So this is just an HTML selector, and then a clickable div and a radio button once again. So we're going to make a selector. And I don't have my HTML like memorized. So if you want to see like exactly what to do, we're just going to go right here because I already wrote it once a long time ago. And like, guys, I don't have HTML memorized. I just look it up as I go along. I have JavaScript's way more memorized. But we just have a select here. Oh, we have a label too. Okay. So we have a label, and it's going to say choose a fruit. Always important to label stuff. So we have a label, and it's going to say select fruit. They have /label. None of my autocomplete's working right now, which is pretty cool. And it's going to be for the fruits element, which we'll do later. So /select. There we go. And then our select is going to have a bunch of options, right? So I'm just going to do this real quick. Option. So we have a couple options for our fruit selector. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's good enough. And we don't want pineapple for all of them. What fruits should I do, guys? Except for the last one that's going to be fig. For no reason at all. Let's do a kiwi. Grapes. All right, Genji, we'll do grapes. Grapes. Cantaloupe. Okay, Wyatt. Genji, no grapes for you. Cantaloupe. Cantaloupe. A little bit of cantaloupe. And okay, fine, Genji. No figs. We'll do grapes. Just one grape. How about that? Grape. Because these are all singular. And so if we were to save our Content.js right now and go back to our app, like React is like in real time updating our app, which is pretty cool. So we have our selector right here. But actually right now it's dumb. This is just regular old HTML. We're not really using the power of JavaScript. So we're going to keep on going. And you can see right here that in our select, it needs to have an ID and some values and some names and stuff like that. And that's going to help our JSX hooked into it. So let's see. Our selector is going to have an ID, which is equal to fruits. It's going to have a value, which is going to be equal to fruits. And it's going to have, what else? An onChange function. Okay, very cool. And then lastly, so when we're going to talk a little bit more about like our hooks and stuff up here. For right now, just follow along with me. But we are taking this fruits variable, which is a JavaScript JSX React hook, which is going to have a state. Which fruit have we chosen? This fruit state is going to get updated in real time as we do an onChanged variable. So when we do things in React, you have these HTML elements, and then within them, you have these curly brackets. And these curly brackets is where you put variables, JavaScript, and non-text strings. This ID thing over here, this is just normal HTML, actually. And so you have like value is blah, blah, blah. That's HTML. When you start to see the curly brackets, you got to think in your mind, okay, there's some variables or functions and stuff going on right here. And in our onChange, notice how I have this part memorized because I'm way better at JavaScript than I am at HTML. We have an anonymous function right here. You could, if you really wanted to, define a function up here like const handle fruit change is a function that takes in an event, and that event, you can do set fruits to be equal to e.target.value and stuff like that. This on change event. And I have this memorized just because I've done it so much. This is very common like web development lingo, this E for event and stuff like that. If you really were like, wait, where the heck did you get that? Anytime that you have a event like on change or on click, it creates what's called a event. And if you really wanted to see what all these properties are, you could console.log this E, this event thing right here, and it will actually spit out that E has a target and a value property in your console and stuff like that. So just so if you're ever like, wait, why the heck does he know this? When you get used to it, it'll just come out like automatically, I promise. So we have this anonymous function right here, and our anonymous function takes in that event, and we're going to be basically setting our fruits to whatever our event is. So set fruits, that's our setter function for our hooks. I will explain hooks more later. Do not worry for now. e.target.value. There we go. And save. And when we go back to our app, nothing's broken. We refreshed. And here, I'll open up our console over here. I know it's a little bit small. For some reason, screen zoom does not work when I have the console open. And let's, just to double check things, sure, why not? console.log.e. Just so you guys can see that, like when we change this, it's the onChange function. Let's change it and see what happens. Hey, cantaloupe. Oh, look, something came up in our console. Very cool. It's the onChange function. And you can see it has these different things. Down here, you can see, like really small, the target, right? So it has e.target, and then it has a value, which is fruits, whichever fruit we picked. We got our fruits all done up here. Next, let's do our number clicker. Sure, why not? Really, this puzzle stuff, you could come up with whatever you want for this puzzle. We just needed something fun to like guide through. So our class name is our button clicker, and we're gonna have a button here just because we're gonna be doing some clicking. So here's our button. And if we just save right now and go back, there's not gonna be anything because our button has like flat CSS. So if I put like, here is a button. There you go. Here's our button, actually. In the CSS, I made it flat so it doesn't look like this button up here, but there's a button there. And we don't want to say here's a button. Let's make it so when we click our button, we have a count that increases, just for funsies. And we've already set this up with our props, and I will talk about props later. I know I keep saying that. But our count up here is just a simple number count that we've defined in our app.js right here, our count and our set count. It's set to 0 right now. We're just doing like our HTML, JSX. I will talk about hooks. So our button will have an onClick function because, you know, we click buttons. That's what we do. So just like before, our onClick, oh, there's those curly brackets. Time to get there. We're going to have an anonymous function. What does that function do? Let's see. We're going to increase our count. So set the count to our count plus 1, right? We want to increment our count. And when you want to display reactive variables in React, you can also do, notice how I had here this text, right? Here is a button. That's just regular HTML, right? If you want to do reactive text, curly brackets in React, here's our count variable. Now, when we go here, our count variable, remember, it's set to 0. And when we click it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we are incrementing our count, right? So our onClick function right here is setting our count to the count plus 1. We're displaying that count. Basically, we just made an incremented counter. Very cool. Just gotta make sure that I did that all right. Yep, very cool. And lastly, we have two more things. We had some radio buttons. Once again, this is more complex and annoying HTML. I looked this up as I was doing it. I still do. I never memorize like weird HTML stuff. But basically, we have our radio buttons, which are part of a form. And our radio buttons have two options. It has one or two. So we're going to recreate that. I'm going to cheat a little bit just because like I don't want to be typing out HTML. You can definitely check this out. But it's basically a form. That goes, we're just going to go in. It doesn't actually matter which grid you put it in, so I'm just going to do it right here. Yeah, no linting. Beautiful. Totally fine though. So what we have here is, once again, just like before, we have a form. And forms are like our HTML way of saying, hey, we're going to be inputting data, and this is all one clump of data. It has an onChange function. So once again, anonymous function with a event. Set the radio value to e.target.value. If you're really sharp, you might have noticed that our onClick event up here for our button didn't have an event. That's because we don't actually care like what we clicked, so to speak. Like, yeah, we're clicking this button, but the actual button doesn't have any data or any event or anything associated with it. We're just incrementing a count, and that count we defined ourselves, right, in a different file, and we're keeping track of that ourselves. So it doesn't actually have anything to do with the button. That's why there's no event up there. So I have a div right here with some radio buttons, and it's an input of type radio, and you'll notice the ID is 1. It has a value of 1 and a label of 1, and once again with 2. Radio button, ID of 2, value of 2, a label of 2, and we click save. We go back, and you can see here we have 1 and 2. There you go. Very cool. And as we are changing these, it is, once again, setting our radio value, because we have a React hook keeping track of what our radio buttons are saying. It is setting it to whatever the target is. So when I click over here, it's set to 1. When I click over here, it's set to 2. Pretty cool. And our last part, we need a treasure chest, right? So we're going to have a treasure chest. And I have right here this really cool binary statement. And if you're experienced with React, you'll probably see this. If you've been really paying attention in coding boot camps, you'll know what a ternary statement is. This is basically a fancy if statement. And so in the middle of our HTML, right, this is all normal HTML. Oh, there's the curly brackets, so we know we're going to do some fancy code. And basically, we have this variable, treasure clicked. And this is a question mark, like it's asking a question. Was my treasure clicked? What this is saying, basically, if I want to rewrite this, I could rewrite this to be something like this. If treasure clicked, then just do this. And then I would have an else do this. That's basically what this ternary statement is, what the question mark is doing. When I first started in my previous job working with React and like React developers, and like I had to work with like offshore developers and stuff like that, and these guys are super good at JavaScript and React. They only use ternaries, and it really pissed me off just because I was like, I can't read this is confusing and stuff like that. And then they would do ternaries within ternaries and stuff like that. Once you get used to it though, this is like the kind of like official like React way to write things. And so like it or not, you will run into people writing this. That's why I always try and use the ternaries to help you guys out. Honestly, the if statement is the exact same thing and a little bit easier to understand. But we're going to be using ternary today, so get used to it. And so what this is saying here is if our treasure clicked variable, which if we look up at our props, we have treasure clicked, and we've defined it here, is using the state of false. Okay, wait, so false, true. This is a Boolean, basically, right? This is a Boolean which is like either true or false, which is great for if statements, right? If this is true, do this. If this is false, do that. So if treasure is clicked, show this. If it's not clicked, show that. So what we have here is if our treasure is clicked, we're going to show our open treasure chest. And our open treasure chest is imported, right? Open chest is imported from images. And what it is just an image. And so we're going to show that image there. If you really want to check out like the SVG, I downloaded this SVG off the internet, but open chest. Here it is. It's an SVG, which is like a really cool image format that's basically drawn vertices and stuff like that. So if our treasure was clicked, we want to open the chest. And if it wasn't clicked, we want to show just a regular old treasure chest. There you go. And we go back, and you can see a treasure chest. Hey, very cool. And we click it, but nothing's happening, right? This is because we still need to do our, there you go. There's our treasure chest. We click it, but nothing happens because we still need to do our logic. But later on, if we use our code to set treasure clicked to true, this will open when you click it, which is very cool. All right, a quick 1-minute check-in. I know that you guys are following along. That was a lot of typing, a lot of switching stuff. You probably have me on in the background. If you have 2 monitors, that's great for following along. Are you guys doing okay? Am I moving too fast? Is there anything that you want me to go over real quick before we move on to treasure? If you just want to follow along there, that's totally cool. And a really good way, especially if you're learning to code and you're learning to do stuff. I know it sucks to do, but listening to tutorial all the way through once and then going back and actually coding along with the tutorial was my way of getting good at coding, quote unquote. And if you're out there studying, you're grinding every day on trying to get a cool coding job like us, then definitely consider doing that when you're studying. We've made a cool little puzzle for our React app. Now we're going to get into the Shepherd.js part of it. And if you're following along with our slides, we have links to the documentation in here somewhere. But our next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a Shepherd.js tour for our contents. And we have all of our contents right here in Content.js. The next thing that we need to open now is App.js. Because remember, in App.js up here, we have our Shepherd tour and our Shepherd tour context imported from our React Shepherd package that we npm installed at the very beginning. So we have our tour and our tour context. And this is our app.js. So we're basically, when we were going through this coding workshop, I did wonder how to put this workshop together so it's easy to understand. And I decided to start with grid content because one, it's just HTML, right? And a little bit of JSX like functions and stuff. And we started from the bottom. Now we're working our way to the top, so to speak. So we were in this grid content and we basically set this up. Now we're going up a level, and now we're going to start working with all these hook variables. And this is wrapped in our Shepherd tour. And our Shepherd tour, basically, I don't have this memorized. I look at documentation as I do things, and I highly recommend that you guys look at documentation as well. But we can see that basically for our tour, if you think about a tour, what is a tour? It's going from one place, showing something, and then going to another place. And that's basically what Shepherd.js does. If you look even here at their page, every time you open the page, this is a tour, right? So step 1, step 2, and they call it steps in their Shepherd lingo right here. And in their quick example right here, you'll notice that actually our tour, or basically, is pretty much the same as what they do right here. We just have a couple of different things, basically we're guiding around an HTML clicker, for example. So in our tour, we're going to need to add steps, and we're going to need to make some buttons, because if you look at this tour one more time, right here it has steps, here's step 1. It also has buttons like go next, back, for example, as a cancel button. So that's what we're going to do here. And our tour logic is basically going to be put into here. We can see, just like before, our steps is equal to our steps curly brackets. So we know this is some fun variable stuff. we can define these steps up here. So our steps is an array, and it's going to have inside of it an object. And I've left in the comments some hints about what we need to do. We need an ID, where to attach to, some buttons, highlighting stuff. And all of this is in our documentation right here, which I've also linked. So in our Shepherd.js docs right here, it says create a new tour, right? Add your steps. Oh, look, here's our steps. And here is a step, and basically it's saying that it has an ID, which is basically just for keeping track of your tour within your tour. This can be whatever, basically, this time. It has some text that you can have in there. It attaches to something. And if you look back at this Shepherd tour, these tour objects, they attach to objects, right? So like here's basically Shepherd, and it's attached to this big Shepherd image. And this next step is attached to the how to include div and stuff like that. So we need to know like what in our code to attach to. That it's going to have some buttons and stuff like that. Very cool. And then we're going to fire off a function or two as we provide and go through our tour. So that's like a basic step-by-step of what we're going to do. So let's go check out what we're doing like that. And we're going to go to our workshop steps, blah, 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 blah. And you can see in our steps right here, we have this object. I'm just going to copy through it real quick, and then we'll go through it together. Because like I said, when I'm coding and stuff, I don't have this stuff memorized. I'm not like a Shepherd.js like pro, so to speak. And as you like grow in your coding stuff and you're using all these random funky libraries, so don't memorize it, guys. Just look at the documentation and be like, oh yeah, that's how you do that. That's how you've like really made it as a coder. So we have this object, and so we have here step 1, and we're attaching it to .radio buttons. Where did I get that from? Our radio buttons, if we go back to our Content.js, remember, we have here a div with the class name of radio-buttons. That's what we're going to be attaching step 1 to. We could attach step 1 to our button-clicker too. I just picked radio buttons just because it's a good place to start for me. So that's what our step 1 is going to be. It's going to be attached to our radio buttons on the right. Our buttons, what are our buttons right here? Our button config, basically, is going to be the same throughout all of our steps. We don't have like different buttons. If you'll notice in this Shepherd example tour that they do when you first open up, if you look really closely, right, the first step says next and then exit, right? Because you can't go back from the first step, right? When you click next, oh, now it says back. So they have like different buttons that do different things based on what step you're on. We're not going to go that fancy for our tour. We don't need to. So our buttons right here is just going to have blah, 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 a simple button config. I'm just going to copy this right here. And it's just going to have a back button and a next button for every step that we have. And we're going to reuse this. That's why I turned it into a variable. You could do like buttons is equal to an array of objects, and then you could do button 1, button style. I don't have it memorized, but like you could do it manually right here, but we are defining it up here as button config, like that. And I'm just going to paste over all that. And this class is right here. Shepherd has some like built-in S to help your tour look prettier. If you don't have this class right here, you can define your own custom CSS. Oh, I want my button to be blue and take up half the screen. You could totally do that. This is just built-in stuff. And it's a text button that says back, and it's the button type is back. And the other one is next, and it goes next. That's all we have, basically. And I think we'll see if we can actually just start up our tour right here with only one step. Start tour. Hey, there you go. Look at that. It has Shepherd's like basic CSS, so it's ugly to be honest. But yeah, what happens when we click next? Oh, nothing, because we only have one step right now. So go ahead, and we have our steps. Step 1. I'm just going to get rid of this real quick to save some space. We have our buttons. We have a scroll to variable. This is not necessary, but it's an option that you can include. it basically scrolls your screen down to whatever it's highlighting. So it takes control of your screen. You can set that to true or false. Do we have a cancel icon? Yes, sure. What is the title of our tour? So the title up here, step 1. And then what is the text? It says click option 2. So I picked click option 2 because our puzzle later on, you're going to have to click option 2 in order to open our cool treasure chest over here once we do our logic. Yep. So this is an array here, right? Steps is an array. So we have an array of objects. So if we were to copy this object and then paste it twice more, I don't have a formatter installed today of all days. If we were to start tour, now we have 3 of the same step, right? Next, we are going to edit these. So ID, this is step number 2. And we're not going to attach to radio buttons. Let's attach to our button clicker, eh? Okay. Button clicker. And we're still going to scroll to, we're going to have a cancel object. Step 2, and our text is, how many times should we click our button clicker? Click here 7 times. Sure, why not? Oh, I forgot to talk about one last part. Sorry, guys. I think that this part is pretty self-explanatory. Step 1 and what to display. Shepherd is really cool, and one reason why I like it is because Shepherd allows you to easily fire off functions and do like custom logic as you move along in your tour, which is pretty cool and powerful. And so what we have up here in our hooks is a function or a hook basically to keep track of our onboarding percent. Remember way back in our Kintone app, we have our onboarding percent up here, and it's a 3-step tour, so 33%, 66%, 100%. Basically, if they've onboarded through step 1, our onboarding percent is going to be set to 33. And if they got to step 2, we're going to set it to 66. And later on when we do step 3, we'll do 100%. And the writing of this is a little bit weird, but basically it's an async function, right? Because in Shepherd.js, as you're moving along with your tour, you click the next button. It's firing off this promise, this async function. And that promise basically is going to wait for whatever you put in here to finish, resolve the promise, and then it's going to display the next part of your tour, right? And so the writing here is, I just copy-pasted this from the Shepherd docs. It is a promise, and once we set the onboarding percent to 66, then it'll get resolved, and we can basically move on with our tour. All right, so last one, ID number 3. Last one we're going to do is our fruits. Yeah. So let's attach to our fruits. Make sure you got an S on there. Step 3 is which fruit should we pick? We'll do grapes. Yeah, we'll do grapes, Kenji. Sure. Why not? Oh, no, we're not grapes. One grape. One grape. So pick grape. And we're going to set this to 100. Our onboarding percent hook is going to be set to 100, and we're going to finish our tour. Let's click it and see what happens. Let's start our tour. Step 1, click option 2. OK. Step 2, click here 7 times. All right. Step 3, pick grape. Cool. And if you guys want to customize, you could make it so the last button says like finish tour. Cool. You can totally do that. Our tour is done. It told us what to do. We're going to pick 2. Let's click here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And pick grape. And then we should be able to click our treasure chest, but it's not opening. The reason is because we don't have our treasure chest open logic ready yet, but we're going to be doing that next. I know that in some parts of this Shepherd tour, I said, oh, just check the documentation, but it is a really important skill. And to be honest, that's what I did. And when you have your coding basics and you get used to like how JavaScript works, like this doesn't look like alien language so much anymore. It seems, oh, okay, they have this object and it tells you what to do and they want you to pass it in. So you'll definitely get used to it. Don't feel too bad if you don't understand like documentation on the first run, and I definitely don't. It takes me a couple times and I practice and I look through it a couple times and experiment. Totally normal, so to speak. Next, the last thing that we got to do is our last to do, and we are going to do our treasure chest logic, and we're going to use effect. And use effect is the second part of our React hooks. And what use effect does is it fires a function that can also be fired off whenever any of its other variables that it's watching changes. And I'll show you how we write use effect. We've imported use effect up here from React. And we write up here, like in the top part of our app, right here, this function. And use effect, basically, you can put logic into here, do this, do that. And down here, there will be like an array. Right now, this array is empty. And when the array is empty, that is saying just fire off this function once when your app loads up, or when this page loads, or when this component loads, and then never fire off again. But this is our treasure chest logic. We want to be checking as we are going through, our users are going through our puzzle. As these variables are changing, we want to be checking like, oh, is it correct? Is it correct? Because we picked grape, it's still not correct. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, is this correct? Is it correct? 2. As soon as all 3 of these variables are correct, we want to be able to change or watch the state of this treasure chest. And so using this use effect with cool dependencies, we are going to, thank you, Genji. Yes. Yes, water. Ah, yes. That's so much better. Thank you. Yeah, we're in the same room. Yeah. Of course we're in the same. Yeah, we're in the same. Genji's right over here. Genji's right over here, guys. That's the green screen. You didn't think I was actually like floating in front of a screen, did you? Come on. Thank you. Ah, that's so good. It's the Kintone Studios here. Use effect right here. We're going to keep track of our treasure chest. We're going to do that with a simple if statement. And so this is really up to you and your puzzle, like whatever puzzle you made. But in our tour, remember we said, so let's see, if fruits is equal to grape, and our count is equal to 7, and what else? Our radio value is equal to 2, lowercase. If all of our variables are correct, we are going to set our treasure clicked to true. Yep, we're going to set our we're going to set our steps complete, actually, to true, because our steps are complete there. We have these like variables that we're checking for. So remember, in our dependency array, that's what this is called down here, a dependency array for our use effect. Basically, like what variables am I going to be looking at? So this use effect is going to be like watching whatever we put in here. Fruits, count, and radio value. AKA, whenever this fruits value changes, whenever this count value changes or radio value changes, run this use effect function. And what this function does, if fruits is grape and count is 7 and radio value is 2, set our steps to complete, basically. And when our steps are complete, then we can open up our treasure chest. So is our treasure clicked? Awesome. And so I already wrote this before and I glossed over it, but I made a function in our Content.js called open treasure. If our steps are complete, so we're passing along this variable up here through our hooks, right? we're setting steps complete to true. We go down to our grid content. I am passing along steps complete down to my grid. So in my grid, I'm my Content.js now, via props, I have steps complete. So I have access to this variable now. So it's keeping track. Is this true? Is this false? If our steps complete is true, the treasure is clicked can be true, and then we're going to upload our status. And I'll talk about upload status after we actually do it. And if it's not, we're going to say wrong steps in the alert, and then we're going to upload our status. So our treasure chest as well is going to have an on-click function that I forgot to do earlier. This grid right here. We're going to do on-click, open treasure, I believe was the name of it. You can double check. Yeah, it's called open treasure. So sorry I forgot to do that earlier, but it makes sense to talk about it now. When we click on our treasure chest, fire off the open treasure function. What does the open treasure function do? If our steps are complete, aka grape 7 and option 2, then open the treasure chest and upload our status. Otherwise, alert them, wrong steps, and then upload our status saying, hey, they failed to complete the task, and upload it to Kintone forever. So if we go back to our app, and I'm in the way of the treasure chest, but if we don't do anything and just click, it's going to say wrong treasure chest. It says it on my screen. The alert popped up. It's not showing up, I think, in my screen capture. Yeah. There we go. So very cool. And we have our function. So let's check to see if this works, eh? Guys, I put so this top one is our open chest, but we're not displaying the open chest. We're displaying the closed chest. Come on. Amateur mistake, right? This onClick function should be on the closed chest because we don't close or we don't click on the open chest. It's already open. We click on the closed chest. There we go. Click on it. Hey, wrong steps, dumb. Very cool. And we click on grape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2. And click on 2, actually. There you go. Ba-ba-ba-bum. Hey, very cool. And so our open treasure function now fires off when we were able to open it up. And you'll see that we have upload status right here. So when we open up our treasure, we upload our status, or if we fail to open our treasure, we upload status right as well. Upload status is defined up here. We already defined this for you as part of our backend that we already set up. But our onboarding status, if the steps are completed is yes, otherwise no. Here's another ternary, right? This is just the same as an if statement. And our percent is our onboarding percent. Then we're posting record. Remember at the very beginning I showed you that we already set up our post record. So if we go to our Kintone database to see how our customers are doing, we have 2 records in there already. And I was skipping my tutorial, so my onboarding percent is 0. The first time I failed, it said wrong steps, and the second time it said, yes, you completed it. So that's working, but we'll test it one more time here in our React app. Start the tour. I'm going to quit halfway through the tour because that was boring. Grape, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 2. Click on our treasure chest, it opens, and refresh Kintone. Hey, there's record number 3, and our onboarding was completed, and we have 66%. Very good. And we did manage to complete the workshop. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. Join our future workshops. We have Meetup, and you can always get notified. Also, so I mentioned it just a little bit at the beginning, but people make a living working with Kintone. And if you have some JavaScript skills and you want a job working with Kintone, not only do we hire like here at Kintone in the US and in Japan, but also other people. We have a new place in our forums. If you've ever checked out forum.kintone.dev, we have this job listing category, and we had some like ex-Kintone devs say, hey, our company's hiring Kintone customizable programming skills people. And definitely check that out, of course. Also, you can make money making Kintone customizations and selling them on our marketplace that exists. All right, guys, thank you very much. We're going to have another workshop next month, so definitely poke your head on for that. But good luck in your coding journey, and yeah, thanks for coming by.